Wendell was 37 years old, worked as a custodian at a Charlotte elementary school, and made exactly $34,780 a year before taxes. At 5:14 a.m., on a Tuesday morning in late September, he stood in the doorway of the life he thought he had. And all he heard was the sound of his own breathing. The air in the duplex was cold, unnaturally so, carrying a hollow echo that didn't belong. He had just finished a double shift, covering for a colleague whose kid was sick, and all he had thought about for the last 16 hours was the softness of his bed and the quiet comfort of his home. But the home was gone. His key had turned in the lock as it always did, but the door swung inward with a weightless ease that was the first sign of wrongness. He pushed it open and stopped dead. The entryway was a void. The small $150 console table he'd built from reclaimed oak, where they always dropped their keys and mail, was gone. The $80 mirror that hung above it, a simple piece from Target they'd bought together years ago, was also gone. The wall behind it was naked, showing the faint outline of the mirror's frame and the single nail hole, a tiny, dark wound. He stepped inside, his worn $65 work boots making a sound on the hardwood floors that was too loud, too sharp. The living room to his left was a cavern of emptiness. The sofa, a comfortable gray sectional that had cost them $1,800 on a holiday sale, was gone. The coffee table, another of his own creations, a solid block of walnut with intricate joinery that had taken him 60 hours to perfect, was gone. The television, Claudette's prized 65-inch Samsung Smart TV, a $1,200 expense she had insisted on, was gone, along with the stand it sat on. Even the cheap $40 rug from IKEA had been rolled up and taken. He walked through the space, his mind refusing to process the information his eyes were feeding it. It felt like a dream, the slow, syrupy kind where you can't run. He turned, looking toward the corner by the window, his breath hitched in his chest, a sharp, painful gasp. That was where his mother's rocker had been. It was the only thing he had left of her, a simple, sturdy piece of cherry wood she had rocked him in as a baby. He'd just refinished it last year, spending weeks sanding it down by hand, rubbing in the oil until the wood glowed with a warm, inner light. It was priceless to him, and it was gone. A single piece of paper sat on the kitchen counter, the only object in the entire downstairs area. It was a plain white envelope, stark against the polished granite countertop they'd had installed for $4,200 2 years ago. Claudette's idea. His name, Wendell, was written on it in her neat, precise cursive. For a moment he thought it was a joke, a cruel, elaborate prank. But the silence in the house was too profound, too final for a prank. This was an erasure. He felt a cold dread wash over him, a physical sensation that started in his stomach and spread through his limbs, making his hands tremble. He was a man standing in the ghost of his own life. What does a person do when they come home to find their entire world has been packed up and stolen in the dead of night? This question hung in the vast, empty space where his life used to be, and Wendell had no answer. He didn't reach for the envelope. He couldn't. Instead, he slowly, methodically, walked through the rest of the house. The dining area was empty. The kitchen, aside from the built-in appliances, was stripped bare. No coffee maker, no toaster, no microwave. Even the knife block was gone. Upstairs, the bedroom was the same. The queen-sized bed with its $2,500 mattress was gone. The dressers, both his and hers, were gone. The closet door stood ajar, revealing a row of empty hangers. She had left him nothing. No, that wasn't true. She had left him his clothes, piled in a heap on the floor in the center of the room. A final, contemptuous gesture, and she had left the envelope. The facade of their life had been solid, at least to him. They lived in a modest duplex on the west side of Charlotte, a neighborhood of hard-working families and quiet streets. They had been married for 8 years. To an outsider, they were a normal, happy couple. Wendell worked his steady job, and Claudette was a paralegal at a growing firm uptown, earning a respectable $65,000. But beneath the surface of domestic normalcy, a crack had been forming, a hairline fracture that Wendell, in his quiet focus, had failed to see was becoming a chasm. He remembered a Saturday morning about a year ago. He was in the small garage he'd converted into a workshop, the air thick with the sweet, clean scent of cedar. He was working on a set of bookshelves for a client, a doctor, who lived in Myers Park and paid him a handsome $4,000 for the custom piece. His hands, calloused but gentle, moved with a familiar grace over the wood. This was his sanctuary, the place where the noise of the world faded, and all that mattered was the line, the grain, the join. Claudette had appeared in the doorway, holding her $1,200 iPhone 13 Pro. She wasn't looking at him, but at the phone's screen. She wore a silk robe he knew had cost $350. "I don't understand why you spend so much time out here," she said, her voice flat, "breathing in all this dust." He'd smiled, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "It's not dust, baby. It's potential. This is going to be a library wall." He gestured to the planks of wood. He was proud of his work. It was more than a hobby. It was an art, a lineage. His grandfather had been a carpenter, and his father, though he'd worked in a factory, could fix or build anything. The skill was in his blood. Right. "A library wall," she'd said, finally looking up from her phone. Her eyes scanned the organized chaos of his workshop, the gleaming hand planes arranged on the wall, the powerful table saw that had been his one big splurge at $2,200, the stacks of carefully selected lumber. Her expression wasn't one of interest or admiration. It was one of dismissal. "Renee and I were looking at listings. Did you know you can get a condo in South Park, a new build, for around $680,000? It has a pool, a gym, a concierge." He'd stopped sanding. $680,000, Claudette? On my $34,000 and you're 65? What bank do you think is signing off on that? It's about ambition, Wendell. It's about seeing the life you want and going for it, not this. She gestured vaguely at his workshop, at the very core of his being. "This is a hobby. It's cute. But it doesn't get us a condo in South Park." The word cute landed like a small, sharp stone in his chest. He'd spent years honing his craft, studying designs, mastering techniques. He had a waiting list of clients who paid thousands for his work, money that went directly into their joint savings account. The same account she was now using to dream of a life he was apparently holding her back from. The scene started to replay in his mind, now tinged with the bitter knowledge of the empty house. There was the dinner with her sister Renee a few months back. Renee was Claudette's older sister, sharper, colder, and even more ambitious. They'd gone to a trendy restaurant in South End, one where the appetizers cost more than Wendell earned in a day. He'd worn his best shirt and a pair of slacks, feeling out of place beside Claudette in her new $900 dress and Renee in a crisp power suit that probably cost double that. "The firm is hinting at a junior partnership track for me," Claudette had announced over their $18 cocktails. "That's amazing, baby," Wendell had said, genuinely happy for her. Renee had offered a thin smile. "It's a start, but you have to have the whole package, Claudette. The right address, the right car, the right social circle. You can't be a junior partner living in a duplex on the west side." Her eyes had flickered to Wendell for a fraction of a second, but it was long enough. The message was clear. He was part of the wrong package. Later that week, the fight over the Burberry dress happened. He'd come home to find a sleek, tan box on their bed. Inside was a trench coat. He'd seen it in a magazine Claudette had left open. The price tag, which she'd carelessly tossed in the trash, read $2,400. "You bought this?" he'd asked, holding the tag. "I got a bonus," she said defensively, not looking at him. "I deserved a little something." "A little something?" "Claudette, this is more than I make in a month. We're supposed to be saving. I was going to buy that new lathe, the one we talked about. It would let me take on bigger commissions." She had finally turned to face him, her eyes hard. "A lathe?" "Wendell, listen to yourself. You're talking about a tool for your little wood hobby, and I'm talking about building a career, a life. What is a lathe going to get us? More sawdust? Splinters and sawdust don't pay for a BMW, Wendell. They don't get us out of this neighborhood. The money from my hobby paid for the down payment on this house," he'd said, his voice quiet but firm. "It paid for your car. It paid for that granite countertop you had to have." "It's not enough," she'd whispered, and for the first time, he saw the raw, unhappy truth in her eyes. It's never going to be enough. The final argument, the one that must have precipitated the great emptying, had been just 3 days ago. He'd just gotten a call from a gallery owner in the Arts District who wanted to feature 3 of his pieces: a rocking chair, a credenza, and a dining table. It was a huge step, moving from commissions to gallery representation. He was ecstatic. He told Claudette the news as she was getting ready to go out with Renee. She was applying her makeup with intense concentration in their bathroom mirror. "That's nice, Wendell," she'd said, her voice distracted. "Nice? It's incredible. This could be the start of something big. I could finally quit the school, do this full time." She had put down her mascara, a $45 tube from Dior, and turned to him. The look on her face was one of pity. "Oh, honey, let's be realistic. It's a sweet little dream, and I'm happy you have something you're passionate about. But it's not a career. It's not real money. It's furniture." "It is real money," he'd insisted. "The pieces I have on consignment right now are worth over $20,000. She had laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound that cut him deeper than any insult. "Consignment isn't cash in the bank, it's a hope. I'm talking about reality. My reality." She had picked up her purse, a $1,500 Louis Vuitton she'd bought on a payment plan. "You can keep your little wood hobby, Wendell. Renee and I are going to go look at what's real." She had kissed him on the cheek. It felt cold, a meaningless gesture. "Don't wait up." He hadn't waited up. He'd gone to his workshop, the place that had always brought him peace, but the sting of her words followed him. He'd run his hand over the smooth, curved arm of his mother's rocker, feeling the history in the wood. He had no idea that in less than 72 hours, it would be gone, and the woman he'd built a life with would be the one to take it. He had no idea what was coming. The betrayal wasn't just in the taking, it was in the method. It was in the calculated cruelty of the erasure. After walking through the empty shell of his home, Wendell finally went outside. The morning sun just beginning to peek over the rooftops, casting long, lonely shadows. His next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, a retired postal worker in his late 60s, was out watering his prize-winning roses. "Morning, Wendell," Mr. Henderson called out, his voice a familiar, gravelly comfort. "You're home early." "Morning, Mr. Henderson," Wendell replied, his own voice sounding foreign and strained. "Just got off a double." Mr. Henderson squinted at him, then at the house. "Everything all right, son? Your place looks quiet." Wendell just shook his head, the words unable to form. A lump was lodged in his throat, thick with grief and confusion. The old man's friendly expression faded, replaced by one of concern. He set down his $30 watering can. Claudette left, didn't she? I had a feeling. Saw the truck this morning. Woke me up. Wendell's head snapped up. A truck? Yeah, big one. Not a moving company I recognized. Came around 6. I thought it was awful early to be making such a racket. He paused, looking uncomfortable. Her sister was with her. They were directing things. The image solidified in Wendell's mind. Claudette and Renee, a team, orchestrating his dispossession in the pre-dawn darkness. Did you see what they were taking? Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. Looked like everything, son. I'm sorry. I saw them carry out that beautiful rocking chair of yours. The one you told me was your mother's. That was the last thing on the truck. Seemed a shame. He shook his head. You know, my new doorbell camera probably caught the whole thing. The one my daughter got me for Christmas, a Ring doorbell, cost her $199. It records motion. You want to take a look? It was the question Wendell had been dreading and needing to hear all at once. Yes, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I think I do. 5 minutes later, he was standing in Mr. Henderson's cozy living room, staring at a tablet. The room smelled of cinnamon and old books. It was the complete opposite of his own hollowed-out home. Mr. Henderson, bless his heart, had already queued up the footage. The screen showed a grainy, black-and-white view of their shared driveway. The timestamp in the corner read 6:02 a.m. A large, unmarked box truck was backed up to Wendell's side of the duplex. The figures of 2 men, hired muscle, were moving back and forth from the house to the truck. And there, standing by the front door, illuminated by the porch light, were Claudette and Renee. Claudette was pointing, directing, her posture rigid and determined. Renee stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding, a co-conspirator. Wendell felt a fresh wave of nausea. He watched them oversee the gutting of his life. He saw the ghostly shapes of his furniture being carried out. The sofa, the lamps, the boxes he could only assume were filled with their kitchenware, their photos, their memories. Then he saw one of the men emerge from the garage, his workshop. The man was carrying his table saw. It took 2 of them to lift it into the truck. Next came his planers, his sanders, his cherished collection of hand tools, all tossed into the back of the truck like scrap metal. An estimated $15,000 worth of equipment, the tools of his trade, his future, gone in an instant. He fast-forwarded, his finger trembling on the screen. He saw them carry out the walnut coffee table. He saw them carrying boxes from his workshop, likely filled with the wood he'd been saving, the pieces he had on consignment for the gallery. They were worth, at a conservative estimate, over $22,000. He watched as they stripped his identity piece by piece. Then came the final, soul-crushing moment. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m. The truck was nearly full. One of the movers came out of the house, carefully carrying his mother's rocking chair. It looked small and vulnerable in his grasp. For a second, Wendell's heart leaped with a foolish hope that they were setting it aside, that she wouldn't take that, couldn't take that. But Claudette simply pointed to the back of the truck. The man nodded, and with a final grunt, heaved the rocker into the dark maw of the truck. It landed with a visible jolt. Wendell flinched as if he had been struck. That was it. That was the final act of cruelty. It wasn't about the assets, it was about annihilation. She hadn't just left him. She had tried to unmake him. Mr. Henderson put a comforting hand on his shoulder. Son, I can save this for you. Put it on a thumb drive. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, Wendell said, his voice thick. Thank you. He walked back to his empty house, the grainy image of his mother's rocker being swallowed by the truck burned into his retinas. He finally walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the envelope. His hands were steady now. The trembling had been replaced by a cold, quiet calm. The shock had burned away, leaving behind the hard, unyielding core of his resolve. He didn't open it, not yet. He had no idea what was inside, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had made a critical mistake. She thought she had taken everything of value. She was wrong. The first step in playing dumb is to control your voice. Wendell sat on the top step of the staircase in his empty house, the only place to sit, and dialed Claudette's number. He let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Composing himself, forcing the rage down, packing it into a tight, dense ball in his stomach. He needed to sound confused, not angry, hurt, not vengeful. She answered on the 5th ring. "Hello?" Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "Claudette, it's me." A pause. "Wendell, I was